the physiology, let's go take air inside. So first of all, let's look at what's going on. As the air goes through your nose, what do you think is going on with the air? Is there a function to your nose? What's the going on? It helps you smell, don't you think so? And the air, have you heard of epistaxis? Right? Epistaxis means nosebleed. So your nose is actually very bloody, isn't it? And that blood is warm blood. And the function of the the blood in your nose, don't you think, is it warms the air. Like when it's too cold, we know that just we understand now the anatomy, how it's open, really. So can you imagine if that freezing cold air goes all the way? It's going to irritate and it can be damaging to your lungs. So the blood in your nose serves to warm the air. It humidifies the air. So it's the first site that changes or adjusts the temperature, the conditions of the air that you're inhaling. Of course, you know that you have your olfactory epithelium up here, right? That helps you smell. So that's also a function of your nose. And then from there, the air will go down to your pharynx, which is a shared organ between the digestive and respiratory system. Then you have your larynx. This larynx, by the way, and I want you to look for this in your cat. So when you open up the cat on Wednesday, I want you to yank that larynx out. Yes, and be very careful, okay?
Oh.
And you will see, don't poke a hole in your tummy, but you will see that, look for this one, the epiglottis. You are you familiar with endotracheal intubation, right? So the patient has to be in a hyperextended position to open up, and you look for this shoehorn, the larynx. I have that.
Feed it right in between. I have to do this every time she leaves. It freezes.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Oh, because it's not detecting movement.
That was what was happening
Oh.
when it was freezing before. So, you get my fingers in it.
So this is your Adam's apple. The larynx, this is your larynx. And the larynx is just made up of trachea. The biggest one, right here, you feel here, the big one. This is your thyroid cartilage. And then the next biggest one is called the cricoid cartilage. So those are the two major ones. And you see it continues all the way in the back. And so when you have the patient lay down to insert an endotracheal tube, you're looking for this shoehorn. It looks like a tongue. You see this in your cat. That's what you're looking for. And that's part of your larynx. This horn here is called the epiglottis. So this is the epiglottis. You see that in your nice lab manual.
Is that what
Look
we're
for the
pulling out?
larynx, huh?
That's what we're pulling out of the cat. Is
No, you're pulling out the whole thing, the whole tube. And the function of this epiglottis, I'm going to go back to the picture up here. This epiglottis is very important, okay? That is a part of your larynx. So here, there's the epiglottis. Over here, you see that? Right here.
Isn't it closed to keep things from
That's
going into your
very
lungs?
good.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. So look at. So this is how it is when I lay down. So it's like this, right? And so and posterior is my esophagus, right? So when I swallow food, the act of swallow, that's why we have to chew properly and swallow properly. The swallowing process involves a coordinated, very properly orchestrated series of muscular contractions that lead to the closing of this epiglottis. When you swallow properly, the epiglottis folds, you write down backwards and downwards. Swallowing folds the epiglottis backwards and downwards. So that when you swallow food, look at, I told you the pharynx is shared by your respiratory and digestive system. Look, if I eat, it ends up in my pharynx. If I breathe, it ends up in the pharynx. So it's the job of this epiglottis of the larynx to make sure that only air goes down here. If it's food you're eating, that's moving down here, you swallow, and that swallowing, the contraction of the muscles will fold this backwards and downwards. So food will go down here. If food goes down here, that's called aspiration. Okay? So we want to look for that epiglottis. Again, the epiglottis is part of what? Your larynx. What is the composition of epiglottis? It's cartilage, hyaline cartilage. All of this is hyaline cartilage, okay? So imagine yourself laying down there, and that's what you look for in the patient. And we're going to blow air. We're going to do simulated ventilation to the like we're doing an endotracheal tube to the cat. We're going to insert it, and then I will blow or you will blow, and you will see if the stomach is the one that expands. You know that you went down the wrong tube. Take it out, put it back again. And if you blow air and the chest is the one that expands, then you know you're in the right opening. You're in the larynx. That's how you find out. And that's how we look. We look which one is expanding.
That's what they used to teach my mom when she was a respiratory therapist how to intubate.
Oh,
was kittens.
They're alive or dead?
Alive.
Oh, they're alive.
They were sedated.
They're sedated.
But that's how they taught them how to do preemies, neonatals.
Yeah.
Was with kittens.
So, it just takes practice, and there's no harm. Well, there is harm. You can't get to the lungs. It's just, it's either you go down here or you go down there. That's all. Then pull it out, put it back in there again. So this is good practice for you guys, although we're just going to use a straw. So a drinking straw.
So
But at least you know how it looks like.
when they do a lung aspiration, what do? They just
Inhale it into your lungs
inhale it.
instead of where it's supposed to go.
Yeah.
So that's how you get pneumonia.
Mm-hmm.
The
Right.
fluid gets into your lungs because it went down into your lungs versus your body.
Yeah.
Like if you're drinking and you aspirate water.
Right.
And it's dangerous.
And people that have dysphagia have trouble swallowing, and they're worried about them aspirating into their lungs versus aspirating. That's why they give mechanical soft food or thickened food, so it goes down easier.
Okay, so we're tracing the air, go down, 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 down. Then here it exchanges here. The question is, how does the air go in? So what you need to remember is we just follow the law of physics. That's why physiology is stemmed from physics. You remember we just look at how substances move. You remember osmosis, diffusion, right? So osmosis just refers to water movement. If it refers to solute movement, we use the term diffusion. Because we are talking about air, we substitute the word diffusion with pressure difference or pressure gradient. Okay, again, this one, the manner of movement of air in and out just follows diffusion principle. But we replace that word diffusion with pressure gradient. So we just looked at the anatomy, what will happen if the air goes here. Now I want to know, how does it get in anyway? So I know that air, first of all, okay, we want to know, we need to be familiar with two types of pressure: atmospheric pressure and lung pressure or intrapleural pressure. Do you agree? There's pressure here So there's your lungs, okay? There's two pressures involved here, right? The pressure out here called atmospheric pressure, which is normally 760 millimeters mercury, and the pressure in the lungs, lung pressure. So atmospheric pressure and lung pressure. Okay, do you agree? If the pressure here and the pressure here are equal, are the same, will there be movement?
Nope.
No movement if it's the same, right? So, for air to move in then, I have to create lesser pressure here than here, right? So, we start with normal pressure, 760, no movement. So that I can inhale, so air can go all the way down there. I have to make the pressure in my lungs less than 760. If it's less than 760, then air will go in. Again, air doesn't have legs. It can't go walk from one place to the next. You have to create the pressure difference so that it can enter. And how do we do that?
Move the diaphragm.
Very good. Muscle contraction, very good. Muscle contraction promotes. Look at. So there's your pressure. So, can you imagine your diaphragm? Remember, your diaphragm is normally dome-shaped. Okay? It's normally dome-shaped. So, we're starting with this type of pressure, right? All the 760 right here and 760 out here, okay? When my diaphragm contracts, when it contracts, it flattens, okay? So from a dome shape, it will flatten. It will flatten. So now it flattens. I'm just going to stick with this picture. So when it flattens, don't you think that the pressure inside, it will go down? Do you agree, right? So, okay, again, right here, you have a set volume of air here. So it's 760 set volume of air. When my diaphragm contracts during inspiration, right? When the diaphragm contracts, this one will flatten. Then all of a sudden, you increase the volume here, right? When you increase the volume here, the pressure goes down. Do you follow? It's inverse relationship. So the key to let the air in then is to increase the pressure, increase the volume, which will decrease the pressure, right? This is referred to as Boyle's law. Boyle's law Boyle's law refers to the inverse relationship between volume and pressure. According to Boyle, if you increase the volume, you decrease the pressure. Okay? And do you understand this one, right? And so that is the purpose of the diaphragm. There's another one that can increase the volume. Your pleura. See? What will move the pleura? You have here, what muscles? What are they called?
Intercostals.
Intercostal muscles. Very good. Your external intercostal muscles. So when the external intercostal muscles contract, can you picture that one? When the external intercostal muscles contract, aren't they going to pull these ribs closer together? Like an accordion. When they pull closer together, and they have a picture here of a pail. Right here. See? When you... Who has a purse? So, like this one over here. Look at this one, okay? So the ribs, you start with the ribs down like this, right? With the intercostal muscles contracting it, it will pull the ribs up. So when you look at this space right here, this space over here, when you pull this up, aren't you increasing the space right there, right? So the contraction of the diaphragm over here, the contraction of the diaphragm increases the intrapleural space that way, the lung space that way, and the contraction of my intercostal muscles will increase the space that way, or the volume. So all of a sudden you have a wider space, the pressure goes down. So you see, the pressure goes down to 758. If the pressure goes down there, then air will just naturally move in. Make sense? Again, why do we breathe? We breathe because skeletal muscles contracted. What are those two skeletal muscles? The diaphragm and the intercostal muscles. There are two parameters involved, volume and pressure. We start with equal pressure. So 760 outside the atmosphere, 760 inside in my lungs or alveolus. If they're equal, no air movement. But once the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles contract, you see that the combination effect is you increase the volume in your lungs, right? The ribs expand that way, you increase it that way, the lungs will go down, you increase the space that way. So all of a sudden, you increase the volume, that will decrease the pressure here. And air will just move in. That's how you breathe in. The question is, what told those two muscles to contract? What told them to contract? Is your
Brain.
nervous system. Yes, very good. Why? Because your medulla received blood that is high in carbon dioxide. You see? Now, we imagine every time the blood is pumped and it's going to my brain, where? The medulla. When the blood that goes to my medulla is high in carbon dioxide, what will it do? It will stimulate this one, intercostal muscles and diaphragm to contract. So what? So you can breathe in oxygen and get rid of that carbon dioxide. It's regulated by your brain, right? That's why people who go into a coma, what do? You hook them into a respirator, right? You have to do the breathing for them because the brain is no longer able to monitor what? Carbon dioxide. Do you follow?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this, do you understand? So that's why inhalation, by the way, is referred to as an active process. It's active because it involves muscular contraction. It involves nerve stimulation. There is no muscle that needs to contract so you can breathe out. So inhalation is an active process. Exhalation is a passive process. If there is no muscle that contracts to promote exhalation, how do you exhale? So look at this picture for a minute, right? So the pressure went down here. You understand how the pressure went down here, right? The diaphragm contracted, the intercostals contracted. You increase the volume here, the pressure went down. Okay? So the pressure goes down to 758, 760. Air just goes in. So all of the air that you just breathe in, so you have a large amount of air that you just breathe in. There is no muscle for expiration. It's a passive process. What promotes? You want now to change the pressure. You want the pressure here to become higher than the pressure outside. So the way to increase the pressure here, look at, when your diaphragm contracts, what's this body cavity here? Abdominal pelvic cavity, right? We have a lot of GI tract organs here. Can you name a few organs here?
Intestines.
Intestines, what else? Bladder, what else? liver,
Kidneys,
you have your stomach, you
kidneys,
have your pancreas,
your
you have
spleen.
so many organs here, right? So every time you inhale, aren't you all of a sudden smushing them all together, right? So when you smush them together, they get too crowded. They're gonna push back up. See? They want to reclaim their space. So they push back up. So look, all the air that you breathe, you're going to be pushing, it's going to be pushed. So all of the air, it's like you're cramping them. Won't that increase the pressure here? Right? Plus, now comes the importance of what? Your elastic fibers in the alveolus. You understand now the importance of the elastic fibers? When you breathe in, aren't you expanding? You're also stretching the elastic fibers. Where? In the alveolus. So when you stretch the elastic fibers here, in the alveolus, they go back to their original length, right? That's what elasticity does. It goes back to its original length. Won't that also lend to the increase in pressure so you can breathe out? Did you hear me? Elastic fibers. This is the problem with cigarette smoke, right? I said, wherever there is elastic fibers, that is the target of cigarette smoke. You heard of emphysema? My mother has emphysema. So what is the problem with emphysema? They have problems with exhaling. Very easy to inhale. You see emphysema patients, they go like this. They have problems with exhaling. Why? Elastic fibers damaged. And again, exhalation is a passive process. Inhalation is an active process. I remember asking that in the test, right? Do you understand? Do you understand how you inhale? Why do we inhale? It is regulated by what? Your brain. Specifically what? The medulla. So what type of receptors do you have in the medulla? Chemoreceptors. So every time the blood that goes to the medulla is high in carbon dioxide, the chemoreceptors sense that. They send an impulse through the phrenic nerve, which stimulates the diaphragm, and the intercostal nerves, which stimulate your intercostal muscles. They contract. The result of contraction, you increase the volume here, decreasing the pressure. That's how air goes in. Now, after all of the air has entered, you're expanding, you're stretching your elastic fibers here. The elastic fibers, the recoil, will all of a sudden squeeze all of that air you inhaled, right? Plus combining your GI organs wanting to reclaim their space, you're going to increase the pressure here. So you see, it goes up to 762. The air naturally goes out. Inhalation, active. Exhalation is passive. Did you hear me? What is the trigger for breathing? Is it oxygen or carbon dioxide?
Carbon dioxide.
Very good. This is why in a lot of pools they say it's not advised to do that hyperventilation, right? To go underwater, because you may forget to breathe. And there's two effects for carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is your trigger or stimulant for breathing. If you do that hyperventilation, you keep on trying to blow off the carbon dioxide, breathe in a lot of oxygen, right? So you can stay underwater for a long time. There's no stimulus for your brain to tell your diaphragm to contract. You won't be able to breathe. And also, there's not enough, because increased carbon dioxide in the body is a vasodilator. And it makes sense, right? The vasodilation in your brain may decrease blood flow and you will pass out. That's why they don't advise that. Breathing. Okay. So what's the purpose of breathing? To get rid of carbon dioxide, right? Have you heard of sleep apnea? right? Like, I think the problem with sleep apnea, it's the spouse who can't sleep. Like my Baba has sleep apnea. I can't sleep if he's snoring too loud. I can't sleep if I don't hear him. So I worry. Can you die with sleep apnea? You
Yes.
can, can't you, right? Because people with sleep apnea, remember, the purpose of breathing is to let the oxygen in, right? And if you have sleep apnea, there's no oxygen coming in. When they wake up, they're tired. And that's not because of lack of sleep.
It's lack of oxygen.
Correct, very good. They're tired because there's lack of oxygen. And now it's very, very easily solved. They use the CPAP machine. You just need to introduce increased pressure here so so the air can go in. So you should tell them, even though that CPAP machine is very uncomfortable, looks ugly. Now I
Believe
think
me,
they have
I have one. It's very
nice,
uncomfortable.
but I think they have nicer, newer models that's not as,
No, they don't.
oh,
Just kidding.
well, anyway,
They do.
anyway, you should tell them that if they don't use the CPAP machine, it's possible that they can die.
It also damages your internal organs because the oxygen is not getting blood to
That's
your
it.
tissues.
That's it. It's
And,
oxygen.
You know,
Very
oxygenating
good.
all your tissues.
Yes,
So
that's right.
you have problems with your heart and your kidneys.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
So that's why it's very, very important to breathe. You understand? See, I told you it's very easy. Very easy, right? So when we talk about respiration, okay, the way to study then your lungs is by, do you agree? It's very important to have healthy respiratory system because that is the way for your lungs to enter, for your air to move in, oxygen to get in, carbon dioxide to get out. Okay. By the way, before I forget, there are two types of lung problems. The main, by the way, one more by the way, the function of the respiratory system really is carried out by your lungs, right? From the nose all the way, they have nothing to do with air exchange. So this is just to promote just a way of moving the air from outside to here. This is the one that carries out the function of air exchange. Okay? So we want to make sure we have healthy lungs. And I know you've heard of restrictive lung problems and compliance lung problems. So restrictive, meaning there's something obstructing it. Let's say you have asthma or emphysema. These are, no, not emphysema, asthma or bronchitis or allergy. These are examples of restrictive lung problems. Compliance is emphysema. That's why it just doesn't pay to smoke. But by the way, emphysema or damage is not just from smoking, although it's the number one cause. Maybe secondhand smoke too, right? We know that children are 7 times more sensitive to cigarette smoke than the actual smokers themselves. Also pollution out there. Any harmful chemicals can affect. You see the importance of the elastic fibers? Can you imagine with smokers, okay, when I remember my mother when she was smoking, and now she regrets it. She has emphysema. I remember when she was smoking, she used to say, I don't really inhale it. It's just to look, I guess, in her time, everyone was smoking, so what? To look what?
Cool.
Cool, I guess. She says, I don't really inhale it, I blow. Oh no, there was my mother, but she says, I blow it out, right? But now she has emphysema. Look at, you inhale all the way inside, and what's being damaged here immediately is the elastic fibers. immediately being damaged by cigarette smoke. So you know, with emphysema then, what's the problem with emphysema? With people with emphysema, I don't think there's any problem stretching the lungs, right? To inhale, they have no problem. You remember the surface tension here can just stretch the lungs. The problem with emphysema, the 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 elastic fibers damage, so it can squeeze the air out, all the air that you inhale. So that's why they have a compliance problem. You can expand it, it can't squeeze the air out. That's why they go. So where is their problem? Inhale or exhale?
Exhale.
Exhale.
How about restrictive? The problem must be in
Inhale.
inhale. Okay? So this one, there must be some constriction. Okay? But either way, they have to be addressed. The only way to find out if you have either restrictive problems, emphysema, bronchitis, etc., is to study lung functions. And we study lung functions by doing spirometry. Okay?
We use those at work, the spirometers, to push the little ball up.
That's right. Okay? So, the lung has volumes of air. It's always filled with air. So, knowing normal values allow us to assess whether an individual has a healthy lung function, or does the patient have restrictive problems or compliance problems. Because we know normal values. I'm not going to require to memorize normal values, that's too much. And this one is always, if you're a respiratory therapist or whatever kind of, maybe pulmonary therapist, whatever kind of health field you're going to go into, this, they're all given, the normal values. So there are normal values for adult females, adult males, babies, there's always normal values. So we have them breathe. Okay? I want you to know normal breathing is called eupnea. We already talked about dyspnea. Increased respiratory rate is called hyperpnea. Or another term is called hyperventilation. That's also referring to increased respiratory rate. Okay? And decreased
Hyperpnea? What did you say?
hyperpnea.
Hyperpnea, what is that?
Hyperventilation.
Okay.
It's increased respiratory rate. Decreased respiratory rate is hypoventilation.
Hypnea?
Apnea. Apnea means you didn't breathe. So that's why snoring, sleep apnea is dangerous. You didn't breathe at all. Is there any other way that you are familiar with to allow oxygen into the body? Is there any other way? I don't know of any other way. It's just through breathing. So people who have sleep apnea, really, it's a deadly, it can cause death. Okay. So this one, these values here, I remember in your test, this came out, okay? And I would have a picture like this. I would already label this for you. I want you to know what this means, okay? So this is always measured with post-op patients. You measure respiratory lung function first before you can send them home. Now you understand why we have to make sure that lung function is normal. This is the only way that they can get oxygen. So unless it gets to normal, we don't send them home. So there are values here, volumes. First, I want you to know tidal volume. Tidal volume is the normal breath. That's just a regular breathing. See? When you breathe in and out, normal breathing in and out is referred to as tidal volume. Okay? Okay. Next, we know that on top of regular breathing, you can inhale deeper, right? So that's referred to as inspiratory reserve volume, the amount of air that you can breathe in on top of regular. So forceful inhalation is inspiratory reserve volume. And I know that I can exhale forcefully. That's called expiratory reserve volume. There is that amount of air, you see this one, that you can never, ever, ever get rid of. This is very important. This keeps the lungs open. So that's why you hear of stories of some people, they tie their victims to a big heavy rock to prevent it from floating, right? Or some people, you see them floating. What made them float? There's that air in there. It's called residual volume. You can't get rid of that one. What is the function of residual volume? It keeps your lungs from collapsing. Okay? So, people with emphysema, what do you think? I'm thinking people with emphysema, maybe they'll have a large expiratory, they can't get rid of it, and their tidal volume may be compromised, maybe. You see? Okay? So, you want to have normal values. In addition to these volumes, you add any two volumes, you come up with a capacity. So, look at, you add the IRV plus the tidal volume, you come up with your inspiratory capacity. So this is all of the air that you can possibly breathe in. Then you have your expiratory reserve volume plus the residual, you have your functional residual capacity. Then you add these three volumes, you have the vital capacity. And then finally, all of the air in the lungs is called total lung capacity. So we just, what is this? Measuring what? Does this measure the air in your bronchus? No. Does it measure the air in your, no. It just measures the air where? In your lungs. I remember asking that in the test. So, does this include the anatomical dead space? No. This is just air in the lungs.
So what is vital capacity?
What's vital capacity? You're adding
Inspiratory capacity plus what?
You're adding what? So the arrow is from here to here. So you're adding this one plus that one. Okay? Meaning all of the air that you can breathe in and all of the air that you can breathe out, that's your vital capacity. If you add the rest of the air that's in there, it's called total lung capacity. I remember saying in a true or false or something, does this measure the air in your respiratory tract? All of the air? No. Don't forget, I play with words there then, right? Respiratory tract includes nose, includes larynx, trachea. This only measures the air in your lungs. The reason why I included that in the test is to make sure you know your anatomy. This is only lungs. Do you understand the importance of this one? You're going to be asked to breathe, to do spirometry. So you're going to be asked to do this in your lab. I want you to breathe in. And a lot of people get frustrated with the tidal volume. They don't even move the spirometer.
A little ball doesn't go up.
What you need to do is, you need to make sure that the muscles contract. That's how you're going to move that. And normal is about 500 mils. And some of you, maybe some who have asthma, some maybe who are taking hypertensive medications can
It would be lower,
affect.
right?
It can affect your spirometry readings. Again, this measures only what? Air in where? Lungs.
Lungs.
Okay. Has nothing to do with the air in the rest of your respiratory tree. Okay? So now that the air entered, okay? By the way, we know that there are two regulators of breathing. The main regulator is your medulla. This is the main. Do you remember when we talked about your nervous system, the medulla and the pons, right? The pons helps the medulla in your breathing. The medulla is really the one that regulates your breathing. So your chemoreceptors for carbon dioxide are in the medulla. What does the pons do? The pons is the one that sets how long each inhalation is and how long each exhalation is. So the medulla regulates how many your respiratory rate, right? Let's say you breathe in and out 20 times a minute. That's the medulla that regulates that. How long is the inhalation and how long is the exhalation is regulated by your pons. The pons has the pneumotaxic center and the apneustic center. Okay. But anyway, do you understand the difference? Where are the chemoreceptors? Right here in the medulla. The pons will regulate how long each respiratory rate is, right? How long is your inhalation and how long is the exhalation. That's the job of the pons.
What were you saying about the chemoreceptors and how don't they go to a nerve or?
Oh yeah, no. The chemoreceptors monitor, the chemoreceptors of the medulla monitor carbon dioxide levels, right? When it's too high, it will tell your what? Your what? What muscles? Right here. See? It will tell your diaphragm and the intercostal muscles through the phrenic nerve and the intercostal
Is it
nerve.
normal 18 to 20? Is that what normal is?
Normal breathing rate?
Yeah. The 18 to 20.
Okay?
Okay.
The last part of this chapter talks about how the gases are transported. Yes?
What was the name of the nerve?
Phrenic nerve,
nerve.
phrenic nerve, right here. Phrenic nerve and the intercostal nerves. The forceful inhalation and forceful exhalation, that's the reserve capacities. That one uses accessory muscles of respiration. You know that you can use your abdominal muscles to breathe too, right? They can help you. But the main muscles for regular breathing are those two. Your phrenic nerve and, your diaphragm and your intercostals. The external intercostals. The internal intercostals are referred to as accessory muscles. They can help if these main muscles are compromised. Okay? So now we look at how once the air goes in, okay? Once the air goes into my lungs, how does it move? How is it able to move from the lungs to my capillaries? And how is the carbon dioxide able to move from the capillaries to the lungs? They just follow diffusion, right? The law of diffusion, except, remember, we change the word diffusion or replace it with pressure gradient differences, right? So once you inhale, there's a lot of oxygen in your in your alveolus, so the oxygen moves from here to here. And then there's a high concentration of carbon dioxide in the pulmonary capillaries, so they move from here to here. The ventilation and perfusion coupling in your lungs is different from the blood flow in your tissues. Do you agree that there's such a thing as ventilation perfusion coupling? Okay?
It goes back and forth versus the other one has a one way. I think it just goes around.
Not really.
Because it looks like it just exchanges. Goes in and out, in and out, in and out.
Right here in your lungs.
O2,
Don't
CO2,
you agree?
O2,
If
CO2.
there is a part of the lungs, let's say you have atelectasis, or maybe there is a compromise, maybe some pneumonia, let's say, or an infection right here. Do you think that if there is not enough oxygenation in this part of the lungs, will there be blood flow here? I think it will defeat the purpose for blood to flow there when it's not able to pick up oxygen. So wherever there is poor oxygenation, blood flow goes somewhere else. Which is different with your tissues, right? We know that the tissues that are compromised, if they need oxygen, there's increased blood flow to your body tissues. And they're opposite. In your lungs, if there's low oxygen, blood flow doesn't go there, it goes somewhere else. That's referred to as ventilation perfusion coupling. It's inverse. Where there is low ventilation, there will be no perfusion. Okay? So we now get how the gases move from one place to the next. It's just pressure gradient difference. How do they travel in the blood? How are they transported? So here's your picture right here. For oxygen, how do you think oxygen is transported? Mainly, where is oxygen transported? Mainly where?
In the red blood cell?
Yes, very good. Mainly inside the red blood cell, bound to hemoglobin. Okay? So, look at this picture right here. 98% of your oxygen is bound inside your red blood cell, bound to hemoglobin. That's how it travels. There's that about 1.5% where oxygen is transported in the plasma. So this is plasma, and this is RBC. So oxygen can be present also in the plasma of the blood. But what's the main way that oxygen is transported? Inside your red blood cells. And then, as it gets delivered to the body tissues, now the question is, what do you think helps in unloading the oxygen? I know that's how it reaches my body tissues. What are the factors or the conditions that will promote the release of oxygen that is inside that red blood cell? Now comes your knowledge of what is hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is what type of compound? It is a
Protein.
Very good. Hemoglobin is a protein. Do you remember how hemoglobin looks like? It looks like this.